Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Episode 4, The Festival of Dionysus. In a time before time, when the gods still walked among mortals, and the veil between heaven and earth hung thin as a whisper, there lived a demigod whose name echoed across mountains and valleys alike, Hercules, son of Zeus, born of a mortal woman and a godly flame. Tales of his strength could shake the earth, but it was his heart, noble and weary, that set him apart in a world run ragged by divine whim and mortal folly. And so it was, as the sun poured gold across the hills of ancient Thrace, that Hercules found himself drawn to a place of revelry. There, nestled between the shoulders of lush hills, lay the humble village of Parthus. Smoke curled from chimneys, and laughter spilled from streets painted with the colors of anticipation. For this was no ordinary day. This was the eve of the festival of Dionysus. Every year, the villagers would don costumes of myth and madness, offering wine, song, and dance to the god of ecstasy and chaos. The god's favor, they believed, would bring fertility to the fields and joy to the hearth. And yet, this year's laughter rang strange in the air, forced and brittle, like joy borrowed from the edge of a nightmare. For though the villagers danced and smiled, a quiet unease haunted their eyes. Whispers of strange disappearances floated on the wind, young women gone in the night, drawn toward the forest during the height of the celebrations, never to be seen again. The elders said nothing. The priestesses of Dionysus offered only vague reassurances, and so the people kept dancing as though movement alone could keep the darkness at bay. Hercules, drawn to the village not by festival but by fate, arrived just as preparations reached fever pitch. He saw the revelers, masks gleaming under the sun, wine pouring like rivers from amphorae, and yet his eyes saw deeper. The smiles did not reach the soul. The joy was a mask, and beneath it lurked something ancient and hungry. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and in the flickering torchlight and shadowed groves surrounding Parthus, his senses told him that this was no celebration of a benevolent god. Something had twisted the sacred rites like ivy choking the roots of an old tree. As night descended, the village transformed. Music filled the air, wild, rhythmic, and hypnotic. Dancers circled fires, their feet stamping ancient patterns into the dust. Wine flowed without end, and the revelers surrendered to the divine frenzy they believed would open the gates to pleasure and paradise. But from the forest came a different music, low, insistent, laced with something unclean. It was then that Hercules saw her, a young maiden clad in ceremonial white, her eyes glazed, her steps pulled as though by invisible strings toward the edge of the woods. No one else noticed, or perhaps no one dared. He followed silently, the revelry behind him fading like a dream at dawn. Through the trees she wandered, and deeper still, until the air grew thick with scent and shadow. Then the music changed, shrill and discordant, echoing through a glade that pulsed with unnatural life. At the heart of that glade stood the altar, ancient and slick with offerings made long before memory. Around it danced figures not entirely human, creatures half goat, half man, whose laughter grated like rust on iron. Satyrs, guardians of Dionysus's more primal rites, had claimed this forest as their playground, and above them all, enthroned, upon a twisted bough, lounged the cause of all corruption. He was not the god himself. No, Dionysus, though wild, was not cruel. This was one who had taken the god's name and fashioned it into a mask, a false priest, a sorcerer of old, who had once served Dionysus and been cast out for seeking to twist divine ecstasy into unending torment. In secret, he had built his cult again, drawing in followers with promises of freedom, only to devour, their souls in rituals soaked in wine and blood. This was what the festival had become, a harvest of innocence, masked as celebration. The priest had woven enchantments through the village wine, calling forth madness with every cup. The revelers were blind to it, caught in his spell. And the maidens, drawn forth as offerings, were consumed in the forest, lost to the dark rites, of a forgotten godling. But on this night, the priest's spell would falter, for Hercules had entered the glade. The satyrs shrieked and fled as the demigod stepped into the clearing, his presence a flame that burned through illusion and enchantment. Alike, the false priest rose, eyes glowing like dying coals, and summoned the full force of his corrupted magic. Vines whipped from the trees, roots tore through the earth, and shadows twisted into claws. Yet Hercules, tempered by trials and loss, met the onslaught with thunder in his fists and fury in his heart. He fought not just with strength, but with the light of clarity, breaking through the haze that clouded the minds of those ensnared. With every blow, the glade trembled. With every step, the spell unraveled. The priest, seeing his power undone, cried out to Dionysus, to the true god he had betrayed, for aid. But the gods do not answer the prayers of those who profane their name, and so he was left to face his doom alone. With a final roar, Hercules shattered the altar. The stone split, the glade groaned, and the twisted magic that had held sway for years evaporated into the night. The forest exhaled, as though waking from a long nightmare. The maiden, released from her trance, fell to the earth in silence. Others too emerged, those taken but not yet lost, blinking in confusion and trembling with the cold of memory returning. Hercules guided them back through the trees, away from the glade that had been their prison. When they reached the village, the fires still burned and the music still played, though softer now, uncertain, as though the heart had gone out of it. The spell had broken there too, and the villagers, sobering in body and soul, looked upon one another with new eyes. The priestesses of Dionysus came forth, humbled and afraid. They had not known the extent of the corruption, only that something was wrong. With Hercules' help, they would cleanse the rites, restore the festival to its true purpose, and guard against such darkness ever returning. And Hercules, as always, did not stay for thanks. His was a path of endless wanderings, for there would always be shadows lurking where no light dared shine. He walked away from Parthus as the dawn broke, the golden sun rising over fields washed clean by tears and hope. Behind him, the village stirred, no longer under spell, but awakening. And in the hills above, the true Dionysus watched in silence, offering no words, only a faint smile, for even the gods, it seemed, could feel gratitude. Thus ends the tale of the festival of Dionysus, where joy was nearly lost to darkness, and one man's courage brought it back into the light. And if ever you hear music beneath the trees, remember this story well, for not all revelry is holy, and not all masks are worn in jest.